Everyone told Caleb Turner the dog was dangerous. The German Shepherd had been returned by adopters, rejected by trainers, and eventually abandoned in a shelter cage after the death of the only handler he had ever trusted. People said the dog was too aggressive, too broken, too far gone to save. Caleb knew what that felt like. As a former Navy SEAL, living alone in the Appalachian Mountains, he had spent years carrying wounds nobody could see. So when he looked into the dog's eyes, he didn't see a threat. He saw another warrior left behind. For a while, adopting Rex seemed like the beginning of a second chance for both of them. Then one morning, deep in the forests of Tennessee, the old K9 caught a scent and refused to let it go. What Caleb discovered after following him into the wilderness would uncover a secret hidden among the mountains, a missing family no one could find, and a criminal operation that had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. A cool spring mist drifted through the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Tennessee, while pale morning sunlight filtered through endless forests of pine, oak, and maple that covered the valleys surrounding the Cherokee National Forest. Caleb Turner had lived in those mountains for almost 3 years, yet there were still mornings when the silence felt unfamiliar. At 38 years old, Caleb was a former Navy SEAL whose life had once revolved around missions, teammates, and responsibilities that stretched far beyond himself. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall, with broad shoulders, powerful arms, and the kind of physical presence that made strangers instinctively step aside when he entered a room. His dark brown hair remained cropped short from years of military habit, and a neatly trimmed beard partially covered a strong jawline marked by age and experience rather than vanity. Deep lines around his eyes revealed years spent under stress, while his calm, measured movements reflected a discipline that never truly disappeared after leaving the military. Most people who met Caleb described him as quiet. Those who knew him better understood that silence had become a place where he felt safest. The mountains suited that silence. His cabin sat nearly 15 miles from the nearest town, hidden among trees overlooking a narrow valley where fog often lingered until mid-morning. He spent his days repairing fences, hiking trails, fishing cold mountain streams, and occasionally helping local search and rescue volunteers when they needed extra hands. It was a peaceful life, but peace and happiness were not always the same thing. Some nights, Caleb still woke before dawn from dreams he never discussed with anyone. He would sit on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the darkness slowly give way to daylight while memories settled back into whatever corner of his mind they came from. On one of those mornings, he found himself driving into Elizabethton for supplies. The trip was routine. Hardware store, grocery store, fuel. Nothing unusual. Then he noticed a banner hanging outside a local animal rescue center. Adoption event this weekend. Normally, he would have kept driving. Instead, something made him pull into the parking lot. The shelter occupied a modest brick building surrounded by fenced yards where dozens of dogs barked, ran, and competed for attention. Volunteers moved between enclosures, while families walked through the facility looking for pets. Caleb spent several minutes wandering through the rows of kennels. Most dogs approached eagerly whenever someone stopped near their enclosure. They wagged tails, barked, jumped, or pressed against fences, hoping to be chosen. Then Caleb noticed the German Shepherd. The dog occupied a separate enclosure near the back of the shelter. Unlike the others, he made no effort to attract attention. He sat perfectly still in one corner, observing everything around him with remarkable focus. The animal appeared to be about 7 years old. His black and tan coat remained impressive despite signs of age and stress. Powerful muscles still showed beneath his frame. One ear carried a small notch from an old injury. Most striking were his eyes. Amber-colored and intensely intelligent, they watched every movement in the shelter without missing details. Caleb immediately recognized the look. Working dog, trained, experienced. The shelter manager approached moments later. Her name was Linda Harper, a 59-year-old woman with short gray hair, kind eyes, and the exhausted expression of someone who had spent years helping abandoned animals. "That's Rex," she said quietly. Caleb continued studying the dog. "Former police K9?" Linda nodded. "How'd you know?" "The way he watches people." Linda glanced toward the enclosure. 6 years with the Knoxville Police Department, narcotics detection, search operations, missing persons. One of the best K9s they ever had. Caleb noticed sadness in her voice. "What happened?" Linda hesitated. "His handler died." The answer immediately explained everything. Caleb looked back at Rex. The dog remained motionless, watching them from across the enclosure. Heart attack, Linda continued. Officer Mark Sullivan. They worked together almost every day for 6 years. Everyone said they were inseparable. Caleb understood the significance immediately. Working dogs formed bonds unlike ordinary pets. Their handlers were not simply owners. They were partners, teammates, family. What happened after that? He asked. Linda Sahil. The department tried assigning him to new handlers. It never worked. He stopped trusting people, became withdrawn, sometimes reactive, not because he was mean, because he was grieving. Caleb remained silent. The explanation felt painfully familiar. Several families adopted him, Linda continued. Everyone brought him back. Some were scared of him, others didn't understand him. Eventually, people stopped trying. For a moment, neither spoke. Then something unusual happened. Rex stood. Linda immediately frowned in surprise. That's strange. The German Shepherd walked slowly toward the fence. Not aggressively, not nervously, deliberately. His eyes never left Caleb. The former seal crouched slightly. For several seconds, both simply looked at each other. Caleb saw loneliness there, loss, confusion. The same invisible wounds he saw every morning in his own reflection. You miss him, Caleb said softly. Rex stepped closer. Linda stared in disbelief. He hasn't done that in months. Caleb slowly extended one hand toward the fence. He did not force contact. He simply offered it. Rex hesitated briefly before pressing his nose gently against Caleb's fingers. The shelter manager covered her mouth. I've never seen him do that with anyone. Something shifted inside Caleb at that moment. He could not explain it. Perhaps it was recognition. Perhaps it was understanding. Whatever it was, he already knew he would not leave without the dog. 2 hours later, after paperwork, signatures, and repeated warnings from shelter staff, Rex climbed into Caleb's truck. As they drove back toward the mountains, neither made a sound. The German Shepherd sat quietly watching forests roll past the windows while sunlight slowly disappeared behind distant ridges. When they finally arrived at the cabin, Rex stepped onto the gravel driveway and surveyed his new surroundings. The dog studied the trees, the porch, the valley, and the wilderness beyond. Then suddenly he froze. His ears rose. His body stiffened. His nose lifted into the evening breeze. Something had caught his attention deep within the forest. Caleb noticed immediately. Years of training taught him to trust instincts, especially those belonging to experienced working dogs. He followed Rex's gaze toward the endless mountains stretching beyond the property. The forest appeared peaceful, quiet, empty. Yet the German Shepherd remained focused on something hidden far beyond human sight. And although Caleb could not possibly know it yet, that moment marked the beginning of a journey that would soon lead both of them into the heart of a mystery buried deep within Appalachia. 3 weeks passed beneath the green canopy of the Appalachian Mountains, and for the first time in years, Caleb Turner found himself adjusting to a routine that involved more than just solitude. Spring had settled fully across eastern Tennessee, painting the valleys in vibrant shades of green, while mountain streams swelled with fresh rainwater flowing down from the higher elevations. Every morning began the same way. Caleb woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, and stepped onto the porch overlooking the mist-covered forest. Most mornings, Rex was already awake. The German Shepherd usually sat at the edge of the clearing facing the woods, alert and watchful long before daylight reached the valley. The dog rarely barked. He rarely demanded attention, yet little by little, trust formed between them. Caleb learned that Rex preferred sleeping near the front door rather than inside the bedroom. He learned the dog still followed certain commands with remarkable precision despite years away from active service. Most importantly, he learned that beneath Rex's intimidating reputation remained an extraordinary working animal who had never truly forgotten his training. The bond developing between them felt natural because both understood something few others could. They were survivors learning how to live after losing the lives they once knew. One cool Saturday morning, Caleb decided to explore a section of forest several miles north of the cabin. The area contained a network of old logging roads abandoned decades earlier after timber operations moved elsewhere. Local hunters occasionally used the trails, but most people avoided the region because of its remoteness. Shortly after sunrise, Caleb loaded a small backpack, grabbed water, and set off with Rex beside him. The first hour passed peacefully. Birds called from the treetops. Sunlight filtered through fresh spring leaves. The forest seemed alive with the quiet rhythm of nature. Then, everything changed. Without warning, Rex stopped. Caleb immediately noticed. The German shepherd's posture shifted in an instant. His head lifted, ears rose. Every muscle in his body tightened with focus. Caleb had seen similar reactions before in military working dogs overseas. It was the look of an animal processing information invisible to everyone else. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Rex moved forward several yards before stopping again. His nose remained close to the ground. Then he looked back toward Caleb. The behavior repeated twice more. The dog clearly wanted him to follow. Caleb frowned. Normally, Rex remained content walking beside him. This was different, purposeful, intentional. Trusting the dog's instincts, Caleb changed direction and followed him away from the established trail. The terrain quickly became more difficult. Dense undergrowth covered sections of the forest floor. Fallen trees blocked parts of the route. Yet Rex moved confidently, navigating the wilderness with remarkable certainty. Nearly 40 minutes later, Caleb began noticing things that did not belong. The first sign was a tire track. Fresh, deep, recent. It cut across a muddy section of ground where no official road existed. Caleb knelt to examine it more closely. The track belonged to a large vehicle, possibly a pickup truck or cargo van. More concerning was its location. Nobody should have been driving that far into protected forest land. "Interesting," he muttered. Rex continued forward. Several hundred yards later, they found another clue. Empty food packaging partially hidden beneath brush. Not old litter left behind by careless campers. Recent. Very recent. Caleb inspected the wrappers. Less than a few days exposed to weather. Someone had been here recently. More than one person. As they moved deeper into the forest, additional signs appeared. Boot prints, broken branches, areas where vegetation had been trampled repeatedly. Individually, none seemed alarming. Together, they painted a different picture. Human activity, consistent activity. In a place where almost nobody should have been, Caleb's instincts sharpened. Years spent as a Navy SEAL taught him to recognize patterns. The forest no longer felt random. It felt used. About 20 minutes later, Rex suddenly accelerated. The German shepherd pushed through a section of dense brush before stopping near a cluster of rocks overlooking a narrow valley. Caleb caught up moments later. What he found made him pause. Hidden beneath leaves and dirt rested a small bracelet. Children's jewelry. Bright blue beads attached to a simple cord. Caleb picked it up carefully. The item looked out of place among the wilderness. Very out of place. The bracelet appeared relatively new. More importantly, it suggested something deeply troubling. Children did not wander that far into the forest alone. "What were you doing out here?" Caleb whispered while studying the bracelet. Rex sniffed the area intensely. Then he moved again. This time the dog followed a route descending toward the valley below. Caleb stayed close behind. The forest gradually opened as they approached lower ground. Soon, another surprise emerged. Through gaps between trees, Caleb spotted a structure. Then another, then another. His pulse quickened immediately. A collection of old buildings sat hidden among the hills. The cabins appeared abandoned at first glance. Weathered wood, broken fences, rusted roofs. Yet something felt wrong. Very wrong. Through binoculars, Caleb noticed fresh tire marks leading toward the area. One cabin showed signs of recent repairs. Another had a generator positioned behind it. Someone was using the property. Someone who clearly did not want attention. Caleb crouched behind a fallen log while observing from a distance. Rex lay silently beside him. The dog remained focused on the cabins. Then movement appeared. A man stepped outside one of the buildings. He looked around briefly before returning inside. Caleb's expression hardened. This was no forgotten settlement. People lived here, secretly, hidden deep within the Appalachian wilderness. The former SEAL studied the area for nearly 30 minutes before carefully retreating with Rex. He needed more information. Much more. Yet one thing already felt clear. The bracelet, the hidden cabins, the vehicle tracks, the unusual activity. None of it belonged together by accident. As Caleb and Rex hiked back toward the cabin that evening, a troubling feeling settled heavily inside his chest. Somewhere in those mountains, something was happening that should not be happening. And judging by the determination in Rex's behavior, the old K9 had only begun following the scent. Neither of them knew exactly what they had found, but both sensed the same thing. A secret was hiding in the forests of Appalachia, and sooner or later, someone would have to uncover it. A steady rain drifted across the Appalachian Mountains the following morning, wrapping the valleys of eastern Tennessee in layers of gray mist that clung to the trees like smoke. Caleb Turner sat at the kitchen table inside his cabin with a laptop open in front of him, while Rex lay quietly near the door. The bracelet they had discovered the previous day rested beside a notebook filled with observations from the hidden settlement in the woods. Caleb had spent enough years conducting reconnaissance to know the difference between an isolated hunting camp and something far more suspicious. The cabins they found deep in the forest were active, organized, hidden, and most importantly, someone had gone to considerable effort to avoid attracting attention. That fact bothered him more than anything else. Throughout the night, he had reviewed maps of the area, property records, and public land boundaries. Officially, the settlement should have been abandoned for nearly 20 years. The land belonged to a dissolved timber company that no longer existed. No active leases appeared on county records, no registered residents, no utilities listed under any name. According to every available document, nobody should have been living there at all. Yet Caleb had seen the evidence with his own eyes. Fresh tire tracks, supplies, occupied buildings, people. Rex lifted his head suddenly as Caleb searched local news archives online. The German Shepherd had become increasingly attentive whenever Caleb worked on the investigation. It reminded him of military working dogs monitoring their handlers during missions. The dog seemed to understand that whatever they had discovered was important. Then, Caleb found something. A news article from 3 weeks earlier. The headline immediately caught his attention. Local family still missing after camping trip in Cherokee National Forest. Caleb opened the article and began reading carefully. David Miller, age 42. Rachel Miller, age 39. Their daughter Emma, age 12. The family had traveled from Knoxville for a weekend camping trip and never returned home. Their vehicle was later found abandoned near a trailhead approximately 20 miles from the area where Caleb and Rex discovered the hidden cabins. Authorities initially believed they became lost while hiking. Search teams spent nearly 2 weeks combing the forest without success. Eventually, the official search scaled back due to lack of evidence. Caleb stared at the family photograph included in the article. David Miller was a broad-shouldered man with short, dark hair and the easy smile of someone who enjoyed spending time outdoors. Rachel appeared warm and energetic, with blonde hair and kind eyes. Emma stood between them, wearing a backpack and holding a fishing rod. She looked exactly like countless 12-year-old girls across America. Happy, excited, completely unaware that her picture would someday appear in a missing persons report. Caleb picked up the blue bracelet from the table. The beads matched the colors visible around Emma's wrist in the photograph. His jaw tightened. He immediately contacted the local sheriff's office and reported what he found. Unfortunately, the response was less encouraging than he hoped. Deputy Carl Benson, a tired man in his 50s who had worked rural law enforcement for decades, listened politely but sounded unconvinced. "You're saying your dog found a bracelet in some occupied cabins?" "I'm saying something isn't right out there," Caleb replied. "The place isn't supposed to be occupied. We get reports about abandoned camps all the time. This isn't a camp," the deputy sighed. "We'll make a note of it." Caleb knew that tone. Bureaucracy. Limited resources. Too many cases. Not enough evidence. Nobody was going to launch a major operation based on a former Navy SEAL's instincts and a K-9's behavior. If anything was happening in those mountains, he would need stronger proof. By late afternoon, the rain stopped. Caleb loaded his backpack while Rex waited near the truck. "Looks like we're going back," Caleb said. The German Shepherd stood immediately. They reached the hidden settlement shortly before sunset. This time, Caleb approached from a different direction, using higher ground overlooking the valley. Through binoculars, he studied every building carefully. There were 6 cabins in total. Most appeared abandoned. 2 clearly were not. Lights glowed behind covered windows in one structure. Another showed signs of recent maintenance. Vehicles arrived shortly after dark. Caleb counted 3. A pickup truck, a cargo van, an SUV. None carried visible company markings. The activity increased over the next several hours. Men moved between buildings carrying boxes and supplies. Nothing illegal was immediately obvious, yet the secrecy remained impossible to ignore. Then Rex reacted. The dog stiffened beside him, His ears rose sharply. Caleb followed his gaze toward the far side of the property. At first he saw nothing. Then movement appeared near one of the older cabins. A figure, small, too small to be one of the men. Caleb focused his binoculars. His stomach dropped. A child. The figure disappeared almost immediately, vanishing behind the building before he could get a better look. Caleb lowered the binoculars slowly. Every instinct inside him screamed the same warning. Something was very wrong. He waited another hour, then another. Shortly before midnight, one of the cargo vans departed the settlement. Caleb watched it disappear down an old logging road hidden beneath dense trees. The route did not appear on any public maps. It had been intentionally concealed. Rex remained alert throughout the observation. Finally, around 1 o'clock in the morning, the German Shepherd began pulling toward a different section of the valley. Caleb followed carefully. They moved through darkness for nearly 20 minutes before reaching a ridge overlooking another structure hidden farther away from the main settlement. Unlike the cabins, this building resembled a warehouse. Large, windowless, isolated. Fresh security lights surrounded the perimeter. Several vehicles sat nearby. Caleb felt his pulse accelerate. He had seen facilities like this before, not in Tennessee, overseas. Locations designed to hide operations from outsiders. He raised his binoculars again. This time, there was no doubt. People were being held inside, not prisoners behind bars, not visibly restrained, but people who clearly did not belong there. Through a partially open side door, Caleb caught brief glimpses of frightened faces, men, women, teenagers. His expression hardened. The pieces finally came together: the missing family, the hidden cabins, the secret transportation routes, the warehouse, human trafficking. The realization hit like ice water. Deep within the forests of Appalachia, a criminal organization had built a hidden transit point far from public view. And if Caleb was right, the Miller family had stumbled onto something they were never supposed to see. Beside him, Rex remained perfectly still, watching the building below. The old K9 had led him here for a reason, and as Caleb stared into the darkness surrounding the warehouse, he realized the investigation had just become far more dangerous than either of them imagined. The next move could no longer belong to him alone. It was time to bring in people who could help finish what Rex had started. A cold wind swept across the Appalachian ridges before sunrise, bending the tops of the pines and carrying the scent of rain through the valleys of eastern Tennessee. Caleb Turner had barely slept. The images from the warehouse remained fixed in his mind throughout the night. The frightened faces, the hidden cabins, the vehicles moving through the forest under cover of darkness. Most of all, the realization that the missing Miller family might still be alive somewhere inside that operation. For years, Caleb had trained himself to remain calm under pressure. But experience had also taught him something equally important. Acting too quickly could get innocent people hurt. Whatever organization was operating in those mountains clearly understood how to avoid attention. They had chosen one of the most remote sections of Appalachia for a reason. If Caleb rushed in alone, he could destroy the only chance those people had of being rescued safely. As dawn broke over the mountains, he sat at the kitchen table with maps spread across the surface while Rex rested nearby. The German Shepherd looked completely different from the dog Caleb had first met at the shelter. Weeks earlier, Rex had seemed withdrawn and disconnected, a warrior without a mission. Now purpose had returned to him. Every movement carried confidence. Every glance reflected focus. It was as though the old K9 had remembered who he was. Caleb picked up his phone and made a call. The number belonged to Sarah Mitchell, a 41-year-old FBI special agent based in Knoxville. Sarah had spent nearly 2 decades investigating organized criminal networks throughout the southeastern United States. She stood 5 feet 9 inches tall with athletic build, sharp green eyes, and dark blonde hair usually tied into a practical ponytail during field operations. Colleagues respected her for 2 reasons. First, she was exceptionally intelligent. Second, she refused to ignore evidence simply because it led somewhere complicated. Several years earlier, Sarah and Caleb had briefly crossed paths during a missing persons case involving hikers lost in the Smoky Mountains. He trusted her judgment. More importantly, she trusted his. "Caleb," she answered after the second ring, "I think I found something." 2 hours later, Sarah arrived at the cabin accompanied by Special Agent Marcus Reed. Marcus, a former military intelligence analyst in his mid-30s, possessed a calm demeanor and remarkable attention to detail. Unlike many federal agents, he listened more than he spoke. Caleb appreciated that immediately. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Caleb shared photographs, maps, notes, and observations collected during his surveillance. Sarah reviewed everything carefully. She asked questions about vehicle movements, security measures, and terrain. Marcus compared locations against federal databases. By the end of the briefing, neither agent appeared skeptical anymore. "The warehouse concerns me," Sarah admitted. "Especially combined with the missing family," Marcus nodded. "There are similarities to several trafficking investigations we've seen before. Remote holding locations, temporary transportation hubs, limited visibility." Caleb folded his arms. "What happens now?" Sarah looked toward the maps. "Now we verify everything." The next several days became a race against time. Federal authorities quietly launched surveillance operations around the region. Unmarked vehicles monitored roads leading toward the forest. Drones examined sections of public land. Financial investigators began tracing ownership records connected to the abandoned properties. Every new piece of information strengthened the case. Yet one problem remained. The criminal network appeared unusually mobile. Vehicles arrived and departed constantly. Temporary routes shifted. Supply locations changed. The organization clearly expected scrutiny and adapted accordingly. That was where Rex became invaluable. On the 4th day of surveillance, Caleb accompanied Sarah and Marcus on a reconnaissance mission overlooking the valley. Several agents monitored activity through binoculars while gathering additional evidence. Suddenly, Rex reacted. The German Shepherd lifted his head and moved toward a narrow section of forest west of the main settlement. Caleb immediately followed. "What's he got?" Sarah asked. "I don't know yet." Rex continued deeper into the woods. Unlike previous occasions, he was not following a scent trail randomly. He moved with certainty, deliberately, as though he knew exactly where he wanted to go. 20 minutes later, they discovered another hidden route. An old logging road nearly invisible beneath vegetation wound through the mountains toward a neighboring county. Tire tracks confirmed recent use. More importantly, the route completely bypassed every location federal investigators were monitoring. Sarah stared at the road in disbelief. "We've been watching the wrong access points." Caleb looked down at Rex. The dog stood quietly beside the road, waiting. Marcus shook his head. "This changes everything." Over the next 48 hours, Rex located 2 additional hidden routes. Each connected different sections of the trafficking operation. Investigators soon realized the organization had created a transportation network throughout the mountains, allowing them to move people and supplies while avoiding major highways. Without Rex, authorities might never have discovered the system before it was too late. Then came the breakthrough. On the 7th day, surveillance teams intercepted communications suggesting a major transfer would occur within 48 hours. Several vehicles were scheduled to leave the warehouse carrying victims toward unknown destinations. Sarah immediately recognized the significance. "If they move those people, we may lose them." Federal warrants were approved that same evening. Tactical teams mobilized. State police coordinated roadblocks. Local sheriff departments prepared support units. The operation would begin the following night. As darkness settled over the Appalachian mountains, Caleb stood outside his cabin watching clouds drift across the ridges. The forest felt unusually still. Beside him, Rex sat quietly facing the distant wilderness. "You know we're close, don't you?" Caleb said softly. The German Shepherd glanced toward him before returning his attention to the mountains. Caleb smiled faintly. For weeks, the dog had carried them from one clue to the next. What everyone once called a dangerous animal had become the most important asset in the entire investigation. Somewhere beyond those ridges, innocent people waited for help. Somewhere out there, the Miller family might still be alive. Tomorrow night would determine everything. And as Caleb looked toward the dark forest stretching endlessly across Appalachia, he felt something he had not experienced in years. Not anger, not fear, purpose. The same purpose that once drove him through impossible missions alongside men he trusted with his life. Only this time, his partner happened to have 4 legs, amber eyes, and the heart of a warrior who refused to leave anyone behind. A heavy fog settled across the Appalachian Mountains on the night of the operation, wrapping the forests of eastern Tennessee in a blanket of silence that seemed to swallow every sound. Deep within the valleys, hidden among endless ridges and dark pine forests, The trafficking network continued its work, completely unaware that dozens of law enforcement officers were already moving into position. Vehicles rolled quietly along remote roads. Tactical teams advanced through the woods under cover of darkness. Helicopters remained on standby miles away, waiting for the signal. Months of criminal activity hidden beneath the mountains were about to come to an end. Caleb Turner stood beside an unmarked SUV, near a temporary command post overlooking the valley. Dressed in dark outdoor clothing and carrying only essential equipment, he looked far more like the Navy SEAL he once was than the solitary mountain man he had become. Beside him sat Rex. The German shepherd's posture was calm but alert, his amber eyes constantly scanning the darkness beyond the tree line. The old K9 seemed to understand that this night was different from all the others. Around them, agents reviewed final plans while radio traffic moved quietly between units. Sarah Mitchell stood near a map table illuminated by a portable light. Despite the pressure surrounding the operation, the FBI agent remained composed. Years of experience had taught her how quickly things could change once an operation began. She studied the final intelligence reports before looking toward Caleb. "We have visual confirmation of multiple vehicles preparing to move," she said. "If we wait any longer, they start disappearing." Caleb nodded. "Then it's time." Sarah glanced toward Rex. "That dog got us here." Caleb followed her gaze. "Yeah, he did." Minutes later, the operation began. Tactical teams advanced simultaneously from multiple directions. Roadblocks sealed the hidden transportation routes Rex had helped uncover. Surveillance units monitored exits while state police secured nearby highways. Everything moved with remarkable precision. Yet, despite the careful planning, nobody underestimated the danger. Criminal organizations that survived this long rarely surrendered without resistance. Caleb remained with one of the teams moving toward the warehouse. Officially, he was present as a civilian witness and guide. Unofficially, everyone understood that his knowledge of the terrain had become invaluable. Rex moved beside him without a leash, staying close but constantly alert. The forest around them felt alive with tension. Every snapped twig sounded louder than normal. Every shadow seemed deeper. Then they reached the final ridge overlooking the warehouse. Through the trees, Caleb could see lights shining from the building below. Several vehicles sat parked outside. Men moved between structures preparing for departure. They had no idea how little time remained. Sarah's voice came through an earpiece worn by the tactical commander. "All units in position." A brief pause followed. Then came the order, "Execute." What happened next unfolded rapidly. Law enforcement vehicles surged forward from concealed positions. Floodlights illuminated the compound. Officers moved toward every entrance simultaneously. Loudspeakers echoed across the valley, ordering everyone to surrender. Panic spread instantly throughout the facility. Some suspects attempted to flee, others froze. Within seconds, the hidden operation descended into chaos. Caleb remained behind the advancing officers while Rex stayed close beside him. Then something unexpected happened. The German shepherd suddenly stopped. His ears rose sharply. He turned toward a separate structure partially hidden behind the warehouse. A smaller building, easy to overlook. Caleb immediately noticed the change. "What is it?" Rex was already moving. The dog sprinted toward the structure. Caleb followed. The building appeared abandoned from the outside. No visible activity, no lights. Yet Rex continued forward without hesitation. The German shepherd reached the door and immediately began scratching. Barking, not aggressive, urgent. Caleb's pulse quickened. He waved toward nearby officers. "Over here!" 2 agents rushed forward. Moments later, the door opened. Inside, several frightened people looked back at them. Men, women, teenagers. Some sat on folding chairs, others stood against walls. Every face carried the same expression of fear and exhaustion. One young girl immediately burst into tears upon seeing the officers. "You're safe now," an agent assured them. "We're here to help." Caleb looked down at Rex. The dog stood quietly in the doorway, waiting, watching, as though he had known exactly where they were. More victims were discovered throughout the compound. Some had been reported missing for months. Others had disappeared only weeks earlier. Then one of the rescue teams made a radio call that immediately captured everyone's attention. "We found the Miller family." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Relief washed through him. Alive. David Miller, Rachel Miller, Emma Miller. All 3 were alive, exhausted and frightened, but alive. They had accidentally discovered suspicious activity while camping and were taken before they could alert authorities. For weeks they remained hidden within the trafficking network, while criminals debated what to do with them. Now, finally, their nightmare was ending. By sunrise, the operation was complete. More than 30 victims had been rescued. Numerous suspects were in custody. Evidence filled trucks and storage containers. The trafficking network that spent years hiding among the Appalachian mountains no longer existed. News of the operation spread quickly throughout Tennessee and beyond. Television crews arrived. Newspapers covered the story for weeks. Federal prosecutors described it as one of the most significant trafficking investigations in the region's history. Yet among all the reports, one story attracted unusual attention. The dog. The former canine everyone had abandoned. The dog shelters called too aggressive, too difficult, too broken. Rex became an unexpected symbol of the entire case. Journalists wanted photographs. Communities wanted to honor him. Law enforcement agencies publicly credited the German Shepherd for uncovering critical evidence that ultimately led investigators to the victims. Through it all, Rex remained completely indifferent to the attention. Several weeks later, life returned to normal in the mountains. One cool evening, Caleb sat on the porch of his cabin overlooking the valley while the setting sun painted the ridges gold and orange. Rex lay nearby, resting peacefully after a long hike through the forest. The mountains looked the same as they always had. Quiet, endless, beautiful. Yet something had changed. Caleb no longer felt quite as alone. He glanced toward the German Shepherd. "You know, they called you dangerous." Rex opened one eye briefly. Caleb smiled. "Guess they got that part wrong." The dog stood and walked over before settling beside the porch steps. For several moments, neither moved. They simply watched the sunset disappear behind the Appalachian ridges. Somewhere out there, families were together again because an old canine refused to ignore a scent in the woods. Somewhere, people who once believed they had been forgotten now had a second chance. Caleb reached down and scratched behind Rex's ear. The German Shepherd leaned slightly into the gesture before relaxing again. Two warriors, two survivors, two souls the world almost gave up on. In the end, they had found exactly what both needed: a purpose worth fighting for, and a place to finally call home. Sometimes God's greatest miracles arrive through the ones the world has already given up on. Rex was called too aggressive, too damaged, too difficult to save. Many people saw a broken dog with no future, but God saw something different. He saw a loyal heart that still had a purpose. He saw a faithful companion who would one day help save lives, bring families back together, and lead others to the truth hidden in the darkness. The same was true for Caleb. After years of service and sacrifice, he carried wounds that no one else could see. Like Rex, he felt forgotten at times, separated from the life he once knew. Yet God had a plan for both of them. Their paths crossed for a reason. What looked like a simple adoption became a mission that changed countless lives. It is a powerful reminder that God often works through unexpected people, unexpected moments, and unexpected friendships. In our daily lives, we may encounter people who seem broken, lost, or overlooked. We may even feel that way ourselves. But this story reminds us that our value is not determined by what others think of us. God does not see us through the lens of our failures, our scars, or our mistakes. He sees our potential, our purpose, and the good we can still bring into the world. Sometimes the very thing others reject becomes the instrument God uses to perform a miracle. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever experienced a moment when God used an unexpected person, animal, or event to change your life? We'd love to hear your story. And if you believe in second chances, loyalty, and the power of faith, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. May God bless you and your family, protect those you love, strengthen you during difficult seasons, and remind you that no life is ever too broken for redemption. And may you never forget that sometimes the answer to a prayer comes walking toward you on four legs, carrying a purpose only God could see.